Imagine a world where the very machines that keep the internet alive are whispering from the shadows, unseen, unclaimed, and they shouldn't even exist. Deep inside the digital arteries that pulse across continents, there are servers that answer to probes, that open ports, that serve data, yet no one can point to a company, a data center, or a legal owner. It feels like a ghost story for the modern age, and the evidence is growing louder with every scan. The internet, as we all know, is a massive tapestry woven from millions of routers, switches, and servers. Every website you visit, every video you stream, every email you send relies on a physical machine somewhere, humming in a climate-controlled room. Those machines are assigned addresses by a global authority called the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, which hands out blocks of numbers to regional registries, which in turn allocate them to internet service providers, cloud providers, and finally, to the owners of individual servers. Because of this hierarchy, we can usually trace any address back to a company, a location, even a specific rack in a data center. When you type a web address into your browser, your computer asks a domain name system server to translate that human-readable name into a numeric address. Then it sends a request across the network, hopping from router to router, until it reaches the destination machine. Along the way, tools like Ping and TracerRoute let us see the path, while more sophisticated scanners like Shodan and Census let us peek inside the machines themselves, capturing screenshots of login pages, banners, and open services. In a perfectly orderly world, every responsive address would have a corresponding WHOIS record, a reverse DNS entry, and perhaps a certificate in a public transparency log confirming who owns it and what it does. But over the past several years, researchers and hobbyists have started to notice anomalies. While scanning the entire IPv4 space, they encountered IP addresses that responded to HTTP requests, that displayed a default web server page, that even accepted SSH connections. Yet when they looked up the ownership information, the records were empty. The reverse DNS pointed to nowhere, and the certificate logs showed nothing. These machines seem to exist in a liminal space, visible to the internet, yet invisible to the registries that should catalog them. Some have dubbed them ghost servers, and the phenomenon has sparked heated debate across security forums and academic conferences. The first documented sightings came from a community of internet cartographers who were mapping the global distribution of web servers. While charting the density of active sites across continents, they flagged a handful of coordinates where the map lit up with activity, but the underlying data showed no registered owner. One particularly striking case was an address that consistently returned a generic Apache welcome page, but its WHOIS entry listed a placeholder name and a contact email that bounced. When investigators reached out to the regional registry, they were told the block had been allocated years ago and was now considered reclaimed, yet the server was still alive and serving content. Another puzzling discovery involved a cluster of IPs in a remote part of the world that all responded to the same SSH banner, indicating a common operating system version. But each address seemed to belong to a different, unregistered block. The pattern suggested a coordinated deployment, perhaps a botnet or a research test bed, but the lack of any public footprint made it impossible to confirm. Some analysts proposed that these could be remnants of decommissioned cloud instances that were never properly shut down, lingering in the ether like digital ghosts. What makes the mystery even more unsettling is that these ghost servers are not just idle machines. In several instances, they have been observed hosting legitimate-looking websites, serving static files, and even participating in content delivery networks. A few have been caught in the act of relaying traffic for popular streaming services, meaning that ordinary users could be unknowingly routing data through these unaccounted nodes. The implications for privacy, security, and trust in the Internet's infrastructure are profound. Now let's pause for a moment. What do you think about these phantom machines that seem to operate outside the rules we thought were ironclad? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective on this puzzling phenomenon. To understand why these servers are so baffling, we need to revisit the basics of how ownership is recorded. When an organization acquires a block of addresses, it registers the details with a regional internet registry, providing contact information, a description of intended use, and sometimes a physical location. This data populates the WHOIS database, which is publicly searchable. Additionally, many operators configure reverse DNS entries so that an address resolves back to a domain name, creating a two-way link that helps with the right tools verify authenticity. Certificate transparency logs further cement this chain by publicly recording every TLS certificate issued for a domain, tying it to a specific address. In a well-maintained network, these layers of verification act like a digital passport system. If a server appears without any of these identifiers, it raises a red flag. It suggests either a lapse in administrative diligence, a deliberate attempt to hide, or perhaps a technical glitch where the address was never properly reclaimed after a service was terminated. Some experts argue that the sheer scale of the Internet makes it inevitable that a few orphaned machines will slip through the cracks, especially as cloud providers spin up and down virtual instances by the second. Others contend that the consistency and clustering of these ghost servers point to a more organized effort, perhaps by a state actor or a sophisticated cybercrime group seeking to exploit the anonymity of unregistered infrastructure. One theory gaining traction is that these servers belong to a shadowy network of dark data centers, facilities that operate without public disclosure, possibly in jurisdictions with lax regulation. They could be used for illicit activities, such as hosting illegal content, running command and control servers for botnets, or providing a backdoor for espionage. The lack of registration would make it harder for law enforcement to trace the physical location, giving the operators a layer of plausible deniability. Yet, without concrete evidence, this remains speculative. Another plausible explanation is that some of these ghost servers are remnants of research projects or academic experiments. Universities and labs often spin up temporary servers for data analysis, simulations, or collaborative platforms. When the project ends, the machines may be decommissioned, but the IP blocks might not be promptly returned to the registry, leaving a ghost in the system. In such cases, the servers could linger for months or even years, still responding to probes because the underlying hardware remains powered. Regardless of the true origin, the existence of these unaccounted servers challenges the assumption that the Internet is a fully mapped and governed space. It reminds us that beneath the polished interfaces and massive data flows, there are still blind spots, places where the rules are fuzzy and where the unknown can thrive. As we continue to explore this digital frontier, each new discovery forces us to rethink our models of trust, accountability, and control. If this is blowing your mind, hit that subscribe button and let's keep exploring together. The next logical step is to ask how these phantom machines managed to stay hidden for so long. One clue lies in the way they respond to network probes. When a scanner like Shodan or Census pings an address, the typical reply includes a banner that identifies the operating system, the service version, and sometimes even a host name. In the case of the ghost servers, the banners are either completely blank or contain generic strings that give away nothing. This lack of fingerprinting suggests that the operators are deliberately stripping away any metadata that could betray their identity. It also means that conventional security tools, which rely on banner grabbing to flag suspicious activity, simply pass these hosts by as if they were harmless. Another piece of the puzzle is the geographic clustering that researchers have observed. While some ghost IPs appear scattered across continents, a surprising number of them congregate in regions known for lax data center regulations or for hosting large numbers of offshore hosting providers. When plotted on a world map, the points form loose constellations over certain coastal cities, often near major submarine cable landing stations. This pattern hints at a strategic placement. Proximity to high-capacity fiber links reduces latency and makes the servers more attractive for any operation that needs fast, reliable connectivity without drawing attention. The persistence of these machines also raises questions about the underlying hardware. In many cases, the IPs continue to answer to ping and even to simple HTTP requests for months after the initial discovery. That longevity implies that the physical servers are not being turned off or repurposed, at least not in a way that removes the network interface. Some investigators have reported that when they attempt a deeper scan, they encounter a response that mimics a standard web server but returns a static page with a single line of text that reads, "Nothing to see here." The simplicity of that page suggests a deliberately minimal configuration, perhaps a lightweight container or a virtual machine that runs a single process to keep the network stack alive. What could motivate someone to maintain such a bare-bones presence? One theory points to the concept of dead drop servers. In the world of espionage, a dead drop is a location where information can be left for a later retrieval without the need for direct contact. Translating that idea to the digital realm, a ghost server could act as a rendezvous point for encrypted payloads, command and control traffic, or even as a storage cache for stolen data. By keeping the server's footprint minimal, the operators reduce the chance of detection by automated monitoring systems that flag unusual traffic patterns or high-volume data transfers. A related hypothesis involves the use of these servers as jump boxes in multi-stage attacks. An attacker might first compromise a low-profile host, then use it as a stepping stone to reach a more valuable target deeper in the network. Because the ghost server does not advertise any services, it can serve as a quiet conduit for traffic, tunneling data through encrypted channels that blend in with normal background noise. This technique would be especially useful for state-level actors who need to move laterally across borders without triggering the alarms that more conspicuous infrastructure would set off. There is also the possibility that some of these ghost machines are remnants of large-scale distributed computing projects. In the early days of volunteer computing, researchers would recruit thousands of personal computers to run scientific simulations, often assigning each participant a unique IP address within a dedicated block. When the project concluded, the IPs were sometimes left allocated to the original pool, but the machines themselves continued to respond to network queries because the underlying hardware remained powered for other purposes. Over time, these orphaned nodes could become indistinguishable from intentionally hidden servers, especially if the original documentation was never published. To get a clearer picture, let's walk through a real-world example that illustrates the investigative process. A security researcher named Alex, who has been scanning the internet for anomalous hosts for several years, noticed a cluster of IP addresses in a small range that all responded to a TCP/SYN on port 88, the standard port for the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. When Alex sent a simple GET request, the server replied with a 200 OK status, but the body contained only a single line of whitespace. The server's TLS certificate, if any, was self-signed and listed a generic common name. Intrigued, Alex performed a reverse DNS lookup, which returned a null result. The WOE's record for the block showed that the address space was allocated to a regional internet registry, but the contact information was listed as private use, with no organization name attached. Undeterred, Alex turned to passive DNS data, which records historical mappings between domain names and IP addresses. The data revealed that, a handful of months earlier, a domain with a seemingly random string of characters had resolved to one of the ghost IPs. The domain's registration details were hidden behind a privacy shield, and the registrar was based in a jurisdiction known for minimal disclosure requirements. The domain's website, when accessed through the Wayback Machine, displayed a single page with a cryptic message: "The future is unseen." No further content was archived, and the domain eventually expired without renewal. What does this tell us? First, the ghost server was at some point associated with a domain that deliberately obscured its ownership. Second, the content it served was intentionally minimal, perhaps to avoid leaving a digital footprint. Third, the server's IP remained active long after the domain disappeared, suggesting that the underlying host was still powered and reachable. This pattern repeats across multiple investigations, reinforcing the notion that these servers are not accidental leftovers, but are maintained with purpose. The implications for cybersecurity are profound. If malicious actors can hide command and control infrastructure behind such low-profile hosts, traditional threat intelligence feeds that rely on known malicious IP lists may miss a significant portion of the adversary's toolkit. Moreover, the existence of unregistered servers challenges the fundamental premise of accountability on the Internet. When every address box is tied to a legal entity, law enforcement agencies can issue subpoenas, request logs, and trace activity back to a responsible party. Ghost servers break that chain, creating blind spots that can be exploited for illicit purposes. From a defensive standpoint, there are several steps that organizations can take to mitigate the risk posed by these hidden nodes. One approach is to augment existing network monitoring with heuristic analysis that flags any external IP that consistently returns empty or generic responses. While such hosts may be benign, the unusual pattern of behavior warrants further investigation. Another tactic involves collaborating with Internet registries to audit address allocations and identify blocks that lack proper contact information. Some registries have already begun implementing stricter verification processes, but the sheer scale of the Internet makes comprehensive enforcement a daunting task. Researchers are also experimenting with machine learning models that can detect subtle anomalies in traffic flows, such as low-volume encrypted bursts that could indicate covert communication with a ghost server. By training these models on a mixture of known benign traffic and simulated malicious patterns, it becomes possible to raise alerts when a host exhibits a statistically unlikely profile. However, the success of such systems depends on the availability of high-quality data, and the very nature of ghost servers, being designed to blend in, means that false negatives are always a risk. Looking ahead, the mystery of the ghost servers may never be fully resolved, but each new discovery adds a piece to the puzzle. As more researchers publish their findings, a clearer picture of the ecosystem will emerge, potentially revealing whether these machines are primarily tools of espionage, platforms for illicit commerce, or simply abandoned artifacts of past projects. The key takeaway is that the Internet, despite its apparent transparency, still harbors hidden corners where the rules are loosely enforced and the unknown thrives. If you've been following along, you've probably started to feel the weight of how much we still don't know about the digital world we rely on every day. It's a reminder that curiosity and vigilance are essential tools in navigating this ever-evolving landscape. So what do you think? Could these ghost servers be the next frontier for cyber defense research, or are they just a fleeting curiosity that will fade as the Internet matures? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Before we wrap up, I want to thank you for staying with me through this deep dive. If you found this exploration eye-opening, consider giving the video a thumbs up and sharing it with anyone who loves a good tech mystery. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss future investigations into the hidden layers of the Internet. Your support helps keep this channel alive and fuels the research that brings these stories to light. In the meantime, keep your eyes on the network, stay skeptical of what looks too clean, and remember that sometimes the most intriguing secrets are the ones that hide in plain sight. Until the next mystery, Stay curious and stay safe.